Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there, and welcome back to Reimagining Love. Okay, we all know that when we are stressed, we are not our best selves. But what happens when stress threatens to erode connection in our important relationships, like specifically our romantic relationships? And worse, what happens when we feel powerless to change the dynamic? Well, today I have Elizabeth Earnshaw joining me for the second time on the show to address this pressing and extremely common issue. Liz is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified Gottman therapist, a AA MFT approved supervisor, and the founder of A Better Life Therapy. She's known for her popular Instagram account @LizListens, and she's the author of I Want This to Work and has been featured in the New York Times, USA Today, the Washington Post, and more. Her newest book, Till Stress Do Us Part, How to Heal the Number One Issue in Our Relationships, is wonderful. It's an empowering guide to stress-proofing your relationship. And I know it's going to be an amazing resource to listeners of this show. Liz writes with this wonderful blend of compassion and practicality, and she leaves us with a validating and useful roadmap to a better relationship. You know, so many of you submit questions to me about stress and relationships. And while we may initially believe that it's our relationship that is causing our stress, Liz says that it's so often the other way around. In fact, she says, quote, "The unprecedented collective stress we all face today is the cause of many relationship challenges that couples are experiencing," end quote. Liz's deeply empathic and wise reframe here is one that I hope you'll better understand by listening to this very conversation. We discuss why our partner often gets the worst version of us, how we can understand the different types or buckets of stressors, and the small but mighty changes that we can make that will serve our relationships for the long haul. We also focus on the pressures of parenthood and what we believe makes this moment particularly challenging for parents. And finally, we hear from a listener in Idaho named Amber, who asks a great question about how to move forward after a rift in a friendship. I loved having Liz back on the show, and I know you're going to really benefit from hearing from her. Enjoy. Liz, welcome back to Reimagining Love.
Thanks for having me.
You are now part of a very small and very elite club, being a guest on the show 2 times. And that is because I have such deep respect and admiration for you and your work, and because I'm so flipping excited about your new book, and I cannot wait to talk about it. So welcome back to Reimagining Love, and thank you for being here again. I really enjoy all of my conversations with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me back.
So the way I want to start is with the question that I ask all of the guests, which is, how are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships today?
I think that it kind of goes along with my book a little bit. So Till Stress Do Us Part is about stress and how it impacts relationships. And I think over the last few years, my husband and I have really been thinking about how do we love each other even when things are really hard, and how do we recognize that those hard things are usually the things that are causing conflict between the two of us instead of, going at each other. And so one of the ways that we reimagine love together is that we try to respond lovingly to the other person when we're noticing that things are tense and difficult. And we really try to be problem solvers with each other as a way to show love.
That is really, to me, the heart of your new book. And it is such an essential And it feels so simple when you say it out loud, but it is something that we forget over and over again, is that oftentimes the thing that we're fighting about is the thing that is creating stress in our lives, but it feels in the moment like it's the other person.
Absolutely. And, I write about in the book how after our first baby came, that became the most, apparent is that it wasn't apparent at the time. It's apparent now looking back, but we were really blaming each other for everything. And that's not to say that there weren't things about either of us that we could improve. It wasn't that I was an amazing communicator or he was always doing the right thing, but it was that we weren't able to overcome our quote weaknesses in those moments because we were under so much stress. And now years later, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, if we knew how to handle a new baby, if we felt like we had enough support, if we had all of that going on for us at the time, we wouldn't have been arguing the way we were. We would have been able to have the space to build the skills we needed to build, to understand each other, to do all of those things, but we didn't have that space.
And without that space, it really truly feels like it's the other person. And I think especially when in an intimate partnership, when we've all been so socialized around soulmate and the one and these highly romanticized beliefs, it makes sense that we get really muddy and that we think, if I'm having a problem with this person right now, the problem must be this person. And that we lose sight about all of the ways. And you make a distinction between the external stressors, the stresses that kind of close in on the couple. And then there are actual internal stressors, the things that happen between us, like mental load that we're going to get into and things like that. But in a highly romanticized world, it feels like if I'm having a problem with you, and what the world has told me is that romantic love is going to work as long as I choose the right person, then of course we get confused and we believe it to be the person rather than looking at the factors at play.
Exactly. And like you said, with romantic love, I think especially when there's these like very romanticized moments too, it's like having a baby and you're not there for me during this amazing moment where I dreamed it would look like X, Y, and Z. And I always thought I would have a partner like this. Or I'm sick. I'm sick. And I always imagined that my partner would know how to respond to me when I'm sick. So not even just like happy moments. But I think that we often have a romanticized view of what our partner will be like in these big moments in life or in these hard moments in life. And it turns out they're just human. And so they often aren't that way. And it can be really disappointing.
Yes. So your book is Till Stress Do Us Part, which is a fantastic title. It's so good. The subtitle's How to Heal the Number One Issue in Our Relationships. And I think one thing I really appreciate about your work is how very practical you are. You are making sure that your reader or your listener is coming away from work with you with actual tools. And so in the book, and this book is actually quite personal. You share quite a few, like your own personal journey to realizing and understanding the impact of stress on you and on your marriage. And you use clinical examples and research and all of that. So tell us a little bit about kind of your inspiration for the book and your reasons for why you kind of take the reader on the journey in the way that you do.
So when my husband and I had our first baby, as I had talked about a few moments ago, we were arguing a lot. And I was wondering, like, what's wrong with me? I'm a couples therapist. And why am I being so contemptuous a lot of my husband? I know not to speak this way. I know how to use like gentle startups and bring up things in the right way. And like, I'm not doing any of this. And my husband's not doing any of it either. We're arguing and we're disconnected. And like, what is going on? And I could not figure it out other than maybe we're not supposed to be together. Maybe I'm just like with a person I'm incompatible with. And then when I went back to work, I started noticing that a lot of the couples I was working with were having some of the same problems where I was seeing otherwise, the two of you know the deal. You know you're not supposed to say mean things to your partner. You know that it's not nice to like get home at the end of the day and go down to the basement and get on your video game all night, not help. You're good people. You recognize how to be in a relationship, and yet you're not able to do it, even when I'm teaching you what to do. And so what I started to recognize was that it wasn't necessarily that there was a skill deficit. And again, this isn't to say that we can't all benefit from rethinking the way that we talk, rethinking the way that we bring things up. but there was a physiological deficit and people were really overwhelmed and they had a lot going on. And because of that, it was very hard for them to do the things that they knew to do. And with my experience, with that experience, with kind of continuing to grow in my own role as a couples therapist, I started to recognize, and then especially after 2020, when like shit hit the fan for a lot of people, I started to recognize like this is something we really need to pay attention to when we're working with couples. And that was the inspiration for the book. But prior to that, that was the inspiration for the way I've kind of changed how I work with couples in general.
Yeah, is really naming, identifying. Yeah, and honoring like that it's not right. People were not being difficult or stubborn. There are actual, like when stress is poorly managed, I think about how Dan Siegel talks about like the window of tolerance, right? It just like the impact of stress is it narrows our window of tolerance. We have a more difficult time staying expansive on the inside, staying patient, staying mindful, and making choices that it becomes this vicious cycle where the more we aren't doing it, the more we don't do it. And the problem gets worse and it's easier to feel dysregulated, right? We're outside of our zone of tolerance. We're either shut down and numb or we're wound up and urgent and activated and impatient.
Absolutely. Another term I really like for that is self-regulation depletion. So we have so many things we have to self-regulate for. Same thing as the window of tolerance. But if you have a lot going on, it doesn't mean that you don't know how to self-regulate, but maybe you have more things going on. And because of that, your ability to self-regulate is depleted. And so if you've been regulating at work all day, and I think we know this with little kids, like if you have kids, you know that they come home from school and they've like held it together at school, their teacher will say, they're great in class. They're wonderful. And then they come home and they are doing their homework and they start tearing it up or they throw something across the room because they've been regulating all day and it's depleted. And the same thing happens for grown-ups. So if you are dealing with a sick parent and work and you have little kids and you just got a notification in your email that you have to do something or your bank account's going to be closed if you don't get it done by this afternoon. And to do it, you have to download an app. There's just all this stuff going on and you're regulating it and you're doing that all day. And then you get home at the end of the day and your partner says to you, hey, I'm a little frustrated because you forgot to do X, Y, and Z this morning. Well, maybe usually you could regulate yourself and say, oh, yeah, I forgot to do that. Sorry. But if you've been dealing with all this other stuff, you're either going to be activated and be like, I don't have anything else in me. What the heck is wrong with you? Leave me alone. Or you're going to be completely withdrawn and you're going to say, forget it. I don't need to be in this house anymore. Nobody notices what I do. And then, maybe you withdraw into another room and you don't communicate. And so there's so much going on that we're often depleted by the time we even get into those relational conversations.
What are your thoughts on the reason that it is very often our intimate partner who gets the shortest end of the stick? Why is that versus, whatever, our boss, our kids? Why does our partner often get the least regulated version of us?
I think there's a few reasons. I think one is like the obvious, okay, they're there and we kind of think they're going to love me no matter what.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional. I think we lose boundaries with our partners because of that feeling where it's like, what's the negative outcome if I don't have the boundary? Like at work, I have to have a boundary. I'll get fired. I'm not going to like yell at my kid's teacher, even though I'm frustrated because that will have some sort of bigger impact. And I often say to people, oh, it's so interesting that you're not as worried about the impact with your boss or your mom or your teacher, but you're kind of okay hurting your partner in this situation. And people don't usually see it that way because they're just kind of comfortable with their partner. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, why am I okay hurting my partner or disappointing my partner, but I'm not okay disappointing my mother? And I just think it's because there's more consequence to be feared that's immediate. Thing is, there's bigger consequence to be feared that's long-term in the relationship, right? Which is the dissolution of the relationship. So I think that's one reason. I think the other reason is your partner is supposed to be your adult village. And so if things are really going poorly in life and who you feel like is your village, and that shouldn't be your only village, but that's what it feels like, is dismissive of you, doesn't see that there's an issue, isn't supportive of you, it really feels physiologically threatening. And, it's like that my kid's not supposed to be the one that makes sure my life is okay. My boss isn't really supposed to be the one. My partner is supposed to be the one. So if I am at the end of my rope and I just can't do it anymore, and my partner doesn't care, or my partner adds to my stress, then yeah, it's going to come out at them because I feel like there's an attachment wound there and I'm going to become reactive to that.
You break down stress in some different categories. You talk about internal versus external stress, minor versus major, acute versus chronic. You even talk about eustress, which is positive stress. I think because stress is so pervasive, it ends up feeling invisible to us. And so it's important to have those frameworks. So can you tell us just a little bit about like those different ways of thinking about the buckets of stress or the types of stress that we experience?
So external, internal, external stress is stuff happening outside of the relationship. So these are stressors that are happening to you, let's say with your family, your parent is sick, your work, traffic, anything that's outside originates from outside the relationship. Internal stress, they originate from inside the relationship. So these might be things like we disagree on finances. We haven't been connecting lately. We're not having as much sex. And now I'm wondering, does this person not love me? So I'm walking around the house all day thinking, I'm not attractive anymore. And so external originates outside, internal originates inside. And then we've got chronic and acute stressors. So chronic are stressors that are happening all the time. So just the daily grind or a chronic illness, they are just always there. Acute is a major event. It happened, but it caused stress. So an acute stressor could be something like an illness happened once, took you out for a few days, or it could be something really big, like somebody has died or you've lost a job. And then, of course, the chronic stressor could be what's the impact after that? We don't have money, all of those types of things. And then we have major and minor stressors, just like what it sounds like. Some are really big, so they cause major upset in our lives. Our child is struggling or has been diagnosed with something complicated, for example, or a minor stressor. We were stuck in traffic. It really irritated us. It brought up our blood pressure, but it's not a huge deal. And so those are all the different types of buckets of stressors. And you mentioned eustress, which is there. Some stress is really good. We actually need it in order to keep ourselves motivated. And there's like a bell curve, right? So if we have enough stress, it's keeping us on the up and up. It's helping us get out of bed. It makes us excited. It makes us want to accomplish something. Going to the gym is a form of that. We go, it feels good, causes tension and challenge in our bodies. But if it's too much, then it becomes distress. So we don't want to exercise too much in a way that hurts us, right? But if it's just enough, it can cause us really good feelings and motivation. So we want some stress. It's not all bad. It's when it goes over that curve and it becomes distressing that it becomes a problem.
And you talk about, I mean, some of these things are like universal, but some of these really are this moment. Like we are living through an incredibly stressful time. There was Surgeon General just released an advisory about like mental health and well-being for parents, saying that over the last decade, parents have been consistently likely to report high levels of stress compared to other adults. Like 33% of parents are reporting high levels of stress versus 23%. So of adults who are not parents, like what is it about this particular moment of parenting, do you think, that has made the job of parents and therefore then parents who are partnered like that much more stressful? Why now?
It's like the perfect storm right now. So number one is roles have shifted rapidly, and that is a good thing in many ways. And at the same time, the way that we navigate our roles in life is often through modeling. And so right now we have a generation of people who they saw a different way of parenting. Many people did. Even if they had dual income parents, things were just slightly different. And so we have people who are kind of have this internalized modeling, but very, very rapidly shifting roles, particularly gender roles. And so I work with a lot of couples, if we're talking about like a hetero couple, there might be the man who makes less money and the woman makes more money, and they both work. And yet they both still have an internalized sense of what does it mean to be a mom and a dad. And so outwardly, they might say something like, this is our lifestyle that we chose. We believe in equity. We want this. I'm so proud of my wife. I love that my husband, is home with the kids more. And then when it really gets down to it, that might not actually be how they feel. And people are afraid to talk about that. And so you'll have these kind of internalized stressors of, I'm not a good enough dad because, my wife isn't getting to be with the kids enough. If I was making more money, they would be able to do that. Or a mother who says, even though I work and even though I provide and I do all of this, I still should be on the PTA. I still should figure out a way to get home at 3 o'clock and make the snack and then like go back to work at 10 p.m. so that I'm doing the bedtime routine because that's what a good mom does. So that's one cause of major stressors.
It's huge. It's so huge. I'm thinking about like most of my caseload as you talk about that.
Almost
Mhm.
everyone on my caseload, they're struggling with this. And it's not just hetero couples, same sex couples struggle with it too because they have internal norms as well.
And especially for queer couples, they don't have a model, right? So they are really truly creating a model out of having not seen this model. But there's, queer families are still, very much like sort of creating the map as they go along. And there's a liberation in that, but there's also an immense amount of pressure in that of the labor of creating and refining a system that's going to work.
And there's such a disconnect too, right? Because the creation is kind of cognitive, but then there's still an emotional experience of, okay, yes, I believe this, but it's still not feeling like I'm the parent that I should be, even though like we actively believe that this is the case. And so that's huge for families and for couples to navigate. The second thing that I think is incredibly challenging is there have been major cultural shifts about what does it mean to parent. And I actually did a poll about this on my Instagram, which was really interesting. I asked because what that report says, one of the things they say is that parents are kind of like overly intense now, that there's this extreme parenting, and it's written in that report as one of the reasons that parents are under stress. And so I asked, do you think, I forget which words I used, but something along the lines of, do you believe that we're extreme parenting and like why? And I got so many responses. And it ran from people saying, yes, I think parents are too involved now, like let your kids be kids, like let them go to school, play outside. You don't need to be putting them in every sport. You don't need to always be at their school. You don't need to do all of this. And then other people saying, well, that's lovely, but that doesn't feel like society supports that right now. I feel like my kid is safe to just play in our neighborhood. So I do have to drive them to soccer every day so they get their social need met. Or I don't feel that they're safe at their school. So I do have to homeschool. Or I do worry about X, Y, and Z. And so I'm constantly like reading about how to be a good parent because I know that there's a childhood mental health crisis and I'm trying to be on top of it. And so there were a lot of varying answers, but I think that that plays a huge role is that the way society feels and looks right now is really challenging for parents. And you could argue back and forth. I've all different types of clients. Some might say, no, it's fine. It's safer now. And others would say, no, it's not safer. But the reality is that you're still inundated with this information and you feel the need to keep your kids safe from the mental health crisis, from gun violence, from whatever else, from being kidnapped. I mean, all of these things were being brought up by people. And so that's huge.
It's also just stressful to feel like you are parenting in a fishbowl when there's so much commentary on how people are parenting. Then there's you're sort of doing the parenting while you're watching yourself doing the parenting, while you're comparing how your parenting is to other people's parenting. Like that's another layer of stress to be like kind of meta parenting.
Yeah, I talk to my clients a lot about this. It's like you kind of have too much information. And it's driving you up a wall. I have a lot of parents who come in and one of their biggest conflict points is this, where one parent is saying, if you do like we can't do that because I read that it's going to cause major attachment issues. Like one parent will say, let's say with sleep, one parent will say, I really think we're losing our minds. Let's let her cry for 30 minutes because we need sleep or we need showers. Or I think it's okay if we exercise and the baby cries because we're losing our minds. And the other parent will say, but I read all this stuff. And all this stuff says if we do that, this child is going to end up with issues. And it goes for food, what they wear, who they play with, what they play, how you talk to them, how you hug them, how you kiss them, how you don't hug them, how you don't kiss them, what you read to them. And it's like, it is so much information and it's very stressful. So the other part of this time is that we're in information overload, I think. And then there's the factors like economy. People are struggling financially, and that adds a lot of stress too.
So everything that you have just named is amplified for minoritized families and families with, economic strain and and families who are raising kids who are racialized and minoritized and, LGBTQ plus and all. So everything is then like intersectional and compounded.
So compounded. And also not only the economic, but there's also a major increase in chronic health issues. And so this is all compounded as well with couples or families who are not only navigating what everybody else is navigating, but they're also navigating how they feel physically. The medical system, which is totally broken right now, really, like, we're all at a baseline of stress, but then as you add more and more factors into it, there are families that are struggling disproportionately with all of it.
So, and I think that is important to name because I think one of the loneliest feelings can be feeling like this is a me problem. And so I think it's very important that we spent the time that we spent looking at the big macro systems that are converging on an individual's nervous system, on a couple's, relationship pattern. So it's really important to name that big stuff. But let's move now into like the what the heck we do about it. And I love in the book where you write, while being in a relationship means signing up for a lifetime of stressors with each other, it also means committing to being each other's safe cocoon. So let's talk about how to help couples be each other's safe cocoon. So tell me about the strategy for managing your thirds. What is that? What's that all about?
Yeah, so I love Dr. Stantak and kind of came up with this idea of thirds. And I love it because I think that it's a big aha moment for couples when you recognize, okay, these are all the things on the outside. So a third in this language is anything that's outside of your relationship that can cause an energy suck of some sort, if we're going to talk about it in simple terms. So thirds can be work, in-laws, hobbies, kids. I mean, it's anything that's like an energy suck. And some thirds are fine because we manage them well. We have good boundaries with them, and maybe we're just lucky and they aren't difficult thirds, right? Maybe we're lucky with our family or our job. And some thirds are more of an energy suck.
It's a third because it's like a third thing in your relationship. It's you, your partner,
You,
and
your partner, and then this third thing that's outside of the two of you. Thank you for clarifying that. So we can either manage those well, or they can be emotional, energetic, financial. Time sucks for us. And if we don't manage them well, what ends up happening is they're external stressors. They end up becoming internal stressors for you and your partner. And so a really simple one to think about, I think a lot of people have experienced this, is if you're not managing work well, for example, and you bring it home and you don't sit down with your partner at dinner time because you're getting on your email, or instead of going on a date, you're staying at the office late. You allow your boss to call you at all hours of the day and you answer the phone and it changes your mood. This is now becoming a stressor for you and your partner. And so what's really important is that you think together about what are our thirds and how are we allowing them or not allowing them to impact our relationship. And this can be a hard conversation because the reality is, and I'm a realist, sometimes you have a ton of control over it, right? Like the work one. And sometimes you don't have a lot of great options. Another example I'll use is in-laws. Maybe your partner's mother, maybe your partner's parents, their father just died. And so their mother is aging and she needs a lot of help. And there aren't a lot of options. The option is that you and your partner might be the ones that help, right? And yet, the way that that's managed can either negatively impact you or it can make you feel like more of a united front. And so, looking at those together and being able to say, yes, we recognize these impact us without blame. This isn't about what's wrong with you. Why do you let your mother impact us? Or, it's your fault that your boss does this. It's more, this is just reality. It just exists. It causes me stress. It causes us stress. And I'm not blaming you. And what can we do to manage it differently so that it isn't drowning us, so that we don't feel overly burdened by it? So maybe we can't leave the job, or maybe we are going to be taking care of your mother until she dies. And if we can at least recognize that these thirds cause us stress, it opens the door for a conversation and it opens the door to reimagine it, right? And to look at how we can navigate it together.
Yeah, and I think by putting by calling it the third, first of all, I love that it puts some distance because it's not a you problem or a me problem. It's a third. It's this thing that is part of our life. It puts the couple at a very different conversation because now we're looking together at what is the tweak, like you're saying. It's not going to be probably quitting the job. It's not going to be cutting ourselves off from your mom. But what are the little wedges of light that we can do? What are the agreements we can make that even like the smallest micro boundaries that then A, make a difference in the actual like lived experience, but B, also make a difference in terms of like helping us feel more like a we. It's us working together. So even just that process of kind of like, okay, what if like 9 o'clock you step away from your phone? Or what if, we commit that we're watching this show together at this time? Or what if we like whatever those little agreements are, then the process of making the agreement is an intimacy promoting experience, right? It's the couple saying, we deserve to have some time, some space together, cultivating our safe cocoon together.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that. It's about redirecting it to us instead of siloing and saying, this is like your issue with your mom, or this is your issue with your job. And like, you need to handle that. And it becomes more of this is our issue because we're in a partnership and stress is going to hit us both. We're going to both have things. And so let's look together. How do we navigate this together?
Are there some kind of favorite practices that you love? I mean, the one about work, boundaries around work it's such a real one for so many couples. Are there some kind of favorite tricks that you have found along the way in your practice or in your own life that really help people kind of create boundaries in a time when we have access to work, basically? Well, work has access to us basically 24/7.
Oh my gosh. It's always there. You could work 24 hours a day, truly. So the very first thing that I think is really important is naming that it exists and being able to validate that. Because without that, I don't think any solution works. They don't stick. So, one thing that I really try to work on people with is being able to empathize with each other's positions. And what that looks like is number one, being able to hear why maybe it's hard for your partner to set work boundaries. So, real and being able to hear that, not hearing it as a threat to you. Because what often happens is you hear their explanation as a threat to you. If you're telling me it's hard to do, then it means you're not going to do it. So I can't listen to it because I don't want to put up with this anymore. And that's completely understandable. And if you can get to the place where you can say, I get it, actually, that must be really, really hard. Your entire team responds immediately, or the only way you'll get a promotion this year is if you're hitting all of these marks and this is how you do it, or you want to be with the kids after school. And so I know that you have to shove it in at 10 p.m., but I want to hang out with you at 10 p.m., but I get it. That must be really hard. You feel like you can't win. And then for the other person to be able to empathize with their partner's position. Again, it can feel threatening. And that's usually where people get stuck because then they feel defensive and they're saying, well, you're saying you have a hard time with this, but imagine how hard it is for me to deal with this boss. But instead being able to say, I know you're not a threat. I know you're on my team. And I recognize it must be really difficult to want to spend time with me at night. And you look over and I'm typing on my computer and I'm not engaging with you. I know that's not what you imagined for our life. If you can get to that point and you can soften to each other, it becomes much easier to get to the next point, which is let's look at our options. If you can't get to that point, you're going to look at the options and then you're both going to be combative about the options.
Because what it feels like is you're asking more of me. I can't believe you would say this to me. You don't understand me. Good. The problem solving is useless because it's on a
It's
combative.
useless. And maybe you'll agree to something. It does not stick. It's useless because the other person thinks, well, I'll close my computer, but you don't understand. I'm not going to get a promotion. You're not on my team. And then spending that time together isn't going to be intimacy promoting because all you're thinking is my boss is going to be mad in the morning and my partner has put me in this position. They're against me too. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think can be really helpful is to look at the problem and to think about like, what about this is the problem? Yes, I don't like that you have so much work, but like, really, what is it? Well, it makes it more difficult for us to get things together at the end of the day. I don't get to spend time with you. Your energy is bad. Like you come into the house and it's bad vibes. So, like, here's the issues. This is what it causes. What could we do together to navigate those issues? Is there anything within the reality that would work? And sometimes the answer is no. We just have to adapt to it. Okay, what does that look like? It looks like we have to have conversations more frequently, maybe, that are empathy promoting and that allow us both to express how this impacts us. It means that we need to make sure we're allowing our stress cycle to complete. So we can't change the job right now, but to adapt to it means that we have to have enough time at the end of the day where we're moving, or we're writing or drawing or talking or doing hugging, whatever it is, to allow that stress cycle to complete. Sometimes we might look and say, well, it is the job, but part of it is that we're not preventing what the job does by really kind of looking ahead. So sometimes I get couples to look at what could have been prevented here. Well, and I'll give you an example from my own life. My husband's a musician. And so sometimes, or all the time, he has gigs on the weekend at night. And so if we don't put that calendar or that schedule into our calendar in advance, we end up getting into pickles because I'll accidentally schedule to go out with my friends or to do something for work. And he'll say, you're going to do that tomorrow? I have a gig. And then we get into an argument and we can't find somebody to help. So the prevention there that prevents those arguments from happening is that every month we make sure we look at that schedule. And we've had to get good at that. We're not people that are good at that stuff. We like to fly by the seat of our pants. And then the final layer is there anything in this that you can shed? And so with the work example, sometimes there are things. Sometimes you are able to say, I actually don't need to be the chairperson on this committee, or I'm going to take my email off my phone because it distracts me. So it could be small things. And I'll check my email when I get home from our date, but I'm not going to have it on my phone anymore because it's distracting. Sometimes the shedding is bigger. Sometimes with work, it is somebody saying, I don't think this will ever change. And over the next year, I'd like to think about how to move out of this position and get rid of this role. With the family example, the shedding might look like, okay, I want to take care of my mom, but I can't be the one that goes over every single night to give her a bath anymore. So I will do it 3 days a week, but I'm going to ask a sibling to do it. So I'm going to shed some of that responsibility. So that's the more like tactical, concrete planning that I do with couples is you empathize, you're on the same team. Now let's look at what do you have to adapt to? What are you going to prevent? And then where are some things that you could get rid of some layers so that it's not causing as many problems?
I'm so glad that you're naming the part about shedding because I'm imagining a listener then kind of reaching the kind of constraint or block about, I can't let my mom down in that way. I can't let work down in that way. And then that maybe is a place to tie it to some family of origin stuff, some early trauma stuff around. I think that's the tricky thing with a lot of work and ambition stuff it is actually legitimate about the economics and the dollars and cents, but a lot of our ambitious behaviors can be tied in wounds around worthiness, not enoughness, proving something, ways that we, perhaps when we were young, I know this is a big thing for me that I've had to work on in my life, is the ways that when I was young, my work was for sure a way that I coped with a chaotic family system, was to go into my room with my work. My homework was a really super safe space for me. And so that was an adaptive behavior back then, but one that doesn't serve me particularly well at some times in my life now. So looking deeply at what are the ways that you may carry a story that I have to work like this in this way, because and the world will constantly reward you for doing that. But can the shedding also be liberating and honoring the ways in which some of those behaviors are patterns that you've brought with you from when you were very young?
Then that's why we keep moving back into that empathy and understanding, right? Okay, so we had it. And now we're at the stuck point, because the shedding is really where people get very stuck. They will say, I know this is tearing my family apart, whatever the thing is. And I can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. And like you said, sometimes there's a real factor there. And sometimes it's really that we need to sit and talk about, what is that threaded with? Is it really true? My own example, I grew up with the most mom in the world. Like
She's a mom's mom.
she is. And everybody's like, all of my friends are like, if there was ever like a mom stereotype, it would be your mom, cheese on the counter when we came home from school and comfy pajamas laid out on the bed. So as soon as we came in the door, we would put our comfy clothes on, and then we would eat cheese and crackers. And then, she had sharpened pencils. Like everything was comforting and sweet with my mother. And, she did all of our things. She was always at school. She picked us up on time, but she was a stay-at-home mom. That was her job. She did her job
Yeah.
really well. I mean, she had a lot of
Yeah.
ambition with that job, which is
Uh-huh.
somewhat
She
where
was
I get it.
CEO.
She was like an A plus
Oh,
plus mom.
yeah.
But I work, and then I take on all this stuff to be like my mom, because she's like, oh my God, my mother role model, right? And I can't do it all the time. And my husband will be like, why are you doing that? Why did you say yes? You're going to be so miserable next week. And that impacts all of us. And so, what's really helpful to me is that family of origin stuff, which isn't always negative. Like, my mom did a great job. There's no negative story written in that. She enjoyed her role. And it's so integrated into me that I have to do a lot of pausing to say, it's okay. Like if I'm not at that baseball game because I'm at the others, or because I do this other thing that's important. It's okay that on Mondays my husband picks up my son from school, because I can be more present the next day because I'm not as overwhelmed pushing everything into a space where it doesn't fit. And so anytime you're struggling with that shedding piece, I really encourage people to think, what is the story? And if there's no story, then we go back to adapt. All right, there's nothing. It really is an economic issue. Let's go back to adapt. Or it really is your values. Let's go back to adapt. But often it's okay, yeah, I need to rewrite my story here.
You know, for your mom, she created that feeling inside of you through the cheese on the table and the sharpened pencils and the cozy jammies. But what she really offered you was her own regulated nervous system, really. Like that was what she was kind of offering you. And so your role looks a bit different than your mom's did. But when you manage your stress well, you're offering that same regulated nervous system to your kids the way that your mom offered that to you, right? It just doesn't look the same. It was less about the cheese and more about kind of how she showed up, which is what you have been so diligent with trying to figure out, of like, okay, how do I show up in a way that I am calm, regulated, a safe cocoon with my husband, and able to parent in a way that feels the way I want it to feel, even if it doesn't look the same way that my mom did it.
I think that's such a great way to put it, is that it was the comfort that I felt that mattered. And if I'm trying to do those things, but I'm just regulated, my children aren't going to feel comfort. And so if you can really look at, what are you trying to get at? I'm trying to get at comfort. Or with a job, I'm trying to get to security, right? It's that I'm really afraid if I lost my job, I would lose everything, or I'm trying to get to pride. I want my family to be proud of me. And so if you can get to what is really like the dream, the goal underneath the thing that you're struggling to shed, even though it would maybe cause a huge shift in your stress levels, then you can figure out how do I get that goal met in a realistic way.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, before I let you go, let's talk to Amber for a moment, okay? We have a listener question from Amber in Boise, Idaho, and she asks, I'm 52 and divorced 2 years from a 20-year relationship. I've struggled with many tough things, including surgery, family of origin problems, mentally ill father, anger problems, codependent mother, navigating a long-distance relationship, and keeping friendships. I'm grieving the marriage and the losses. It's very difficult. I'm doing better. My current long distance relationship is good and healthy. I have great work quality and relationships. I'm physically healthy, but a rift in a friendship recently revealed itself. A friend of mine shared that she intentionally stepped away from our friendship because I wasn't, quote, curious about her life. I trust and believe her feelings. I believe my behavior led her to feel that way. My question: since divorce, I've experienced a lower mental capacity to deal with life's complexities. I forget details, conversations. I sometimes forget to do what I've said. I fail to reach out to family and friends. I just feel less capacity to participate in things that aren't right in front of me. I intend to be thoughtful, curious, anticipating others' needs. Is this something you would expect in a person who has experienced major life upheavals? And how can I heal from it? And how long might it take? Whew, okay. Liz, where do you want to start with Amber?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Amber seems so self aware and caring.
Agreed. Agreed.
I'm like so impressed with that response. It's like she's very curious about what she could do for herself, with herself, for her friend, or just like in general. And so I think that's beautiful. There's no defensiveness there. I think the second thing that I was thinking about is it's very normal during a major stressor, if we're talking about stressors, to have a diminished capacity in many ways. And it's actually physiological. We do find that after these major moments that people's ability to remember things, to stay engaged, to be curious, all of those types of things are actually genuinely impacted. This isn't just,
Compromised.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not just like an emotional, I don't feel like it. It's truly compromised. And so I just want to validate that that's very real for Amber, and that it's very likely that you're not just, I don't want you to question yourself. You're likely not imagining that this is the case. The other piece is that with grief, whenever I'm working with people who are grieving something, a death, divorce, one of the biggest challenges they face is social. So Amber's not alone in that. It's this experience of my friendships are changing and I don't really understand what to do with it. Either I'm disappointed in people, or it's very common to have people say, you can't be there for me anymore. All you want to talk about is with death, divorce, all sorts of things. It's been a while and it just feels heavy to be with you, or whatever it is. And so this is a very common occurrence. And the thing is that it's likely that, most of us, your friend included, don't know how to navigate grief. And sometimes it moves more quickly, the timeline moves more quickly for the outsiders. So for you, you're still in that fog, that experience. Outside of you, people are like, oh, it's been whatever amount of time and I'm over it. So Amber should be over it by now. It's just not the reality. I'm trying to think about like what I would suggest that Amber do, because all of these things are very real realities. I'm curious what you think.
I'm glad you spent some time with just the validation of it, because it's real, it's physiological. I can imagine that there were times for Amber early in her process where, yeah, being with her friend, even if she loves this friend very much, was just difficult and taxing, and perhaps nothing the friend said felt quite right. Like, I know that so often, like when we're in our grief, it's like we want comfort, but the comfort doesn't land quite right. So I can imagine that that was really difficult. And I think that Amber as well, I don't know, this friend might mean, it may be that this friend really truly has stepped away forever. And then Amber will have to just kind of grieve that loss and wish that friend well and cultivate take the lessons she wants to take from it or that she can take from it and cultivate the relationships that are right here, right now. So that may very well be that is one path. I wonder about whether Amber has said to this friend, it makes sense. Everything you're saying makes sense. Take the time that you need, but please know that if you would like to give me another chance, I would like to see if we can do this differently. Like, I think there's such power in accountability in the way that Amber has written this up. She can take accountability. I think it sounds like, I want Amber to be extending herself a ton of compassion so that she can say to that friend, I'm sorry. What you're saying makes sense. I can see how your experiences were with me. And I feel like 2 years out, I'd like to try and do it differently. I can't promise, but if you would like to give me another chance, I would like. And then if and as this friend does give her another chance, just making sure that Amber is resourcing herself well. Maybe she has a support community so that she's, or an individual therapist of her own so that she has a place where she can really be processing so that then when she's with her friend, she maybe is a bit more liberated, has a little bit more bandwidth to be more back and forth.
I agree. And one thing I was thinking as you were talking is that Amber shared that there were a lot of experiences growing up where maybe Amber's used to always anticipating needs and being like that friend who's like on top of everything. And so the friend might have felt that this shift was like, wow, Amber doesn't care about me anymore because the way Amber has shown care has been to maybe overextend. And one thing I'm curious about is maybe at this point you're not overextending anymore. And this might be a shift that you maintain. So maybe this is like a new part of you is to say, I have to take care of myself sometimes. She said she grew up in like a codependent household and there were a lot of things. And so this might be new. And one thing down the road, when you talk to your friend, you could also share, this is like how I'm able to give right now. Like, I recognize that maybe in the past, I was like always the one who did X, Y, and Z. And right now, because of what I've gone through, I can't do as much. And I want to hear what like you need in order for our friendship to work and being with each other in that and being able to see if that can happen. But one thing I think sometimes people think they have to do more than they really have to. And I think you gave such like a simple path forward, which people usually don't recognize. They feel frozen because it's like, do I have to do something magical for my friend to repair this? And everything Amber said in that letter is almost what she could say to her friend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because the validation and the acknowledgement, right? She can't change the last 2 years. She can't undo that. And I think you're so spot on with this part about like the repair might open up a really interesting conversation about what the agreements were in that 1.0 version of the friendship. And maybe it was Amber totally overfunctioning. And so there is, for as much as there's an Amber piece, there's also a friend piece. And so what were the goodies that the friend got out of that first version of the friendship? What are the unique contours for the friend about what Amber's, quote unquote preoccupation felt like for the friend? Like what did that activate inside of the friend? Because there's a friend, I do the golden equation of love. There's the Amber stuff, there's the friend stuff, and that equaled the dynamic. So we love Amber's accountability, but we also, with the repair, perhaps then the apology, perhaps then it opens up exploration of what was the friend part of it. Yeah. And then I love what you're saying about what does 2.0 look like? If Amber's like, listen, I'm not who I used to be. Because she's not who she used to be. Doesn't mean she's broken, doesn't mean she's done for, doesn't mean she's got nothing to offer. But what does another version of this friendship look like that's built on maybe a different foundation? Amber, thank you. I really am glad that you sent that question, and I hope that there are some some goodies here. I think that's the timeline. I don't know. I'm not one to put a timeline on grief and healing. I know a lot of us struggle with the fact that the diagnostic manual in our field has now created a thing called prolonged grief disorder that sort of says that there is this very linear window of time. I think a lot of us mental health professionals really struggle with that idea that grief should have a timeline. But I think it's more about how are we caring for ourselves and how are we honoring our journey rather than a timestamp. But I would not be surprised if you start to feel a little bit more, maybe not like your old self, because you don't need to be your old self, but feeling a little bit more like a you that feels recognizable, a you that feels that you're curious about, that you can feel embodied with as you continue to make sense of the last couple of years of massive change in your life. Liz, thank you so much. Will you please take just a moment and tell us how people can find out more about you? We've got links to the book in the show notes, which is so good. Till Stress Do Us Part, How to Heal the Number One Issue in Our Relationships. But what else? What else do you have going on, and how can people learn more about your good work?
So you can find information about me on my website, which is elizabethernshaw.com, or on Instagram at LizListens. And as you mentioned, the book is available everywhere the books are sold. So you can find it anywhere you like to buy books. I always encourage people, try to buy them from your local bookstore. You can just go on their website and you can type it into the search and order it through them. They don't even need to have it in the store, but it obviously then benefits your local community.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Liz, for joining me again on the show. I love how Liz is shining a spotlight on stress in relationships, because all of us could use some extra tools to handle those tough moments when love and stress collide. And thank you also to Amber, listening from Idaho. I really appreciated your vulnerable question. Until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon, or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.